That Monday morning, Dr. Emma's hands wouldn't stop shaking during surgery. For 15 years, she had been the cardiac surgery department's golden standard. Colleagues called her the machine, not out of disrespect, but in awe of her precision, her composure, her seemingly endless capacity to perform flawlessly under pressure. But today, halfway through a routine bypass, her hands betrayed her. "Dr. Chen?" The surgical resident's voice carried concern. "Are you all right?" Emma's grip tightened on the scalpel. Of course she was all right. She was always all right. Perfect surgeons didn't have moments of weakness, didn't feel the crushing weight of expectations, didn't want to scream in the middle of sterile operating rooms. "I'm fine," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos inside. "Continue monitoring vitals." But she wasn't fine. She hadn't been fine for months. What no one in that operating room could see was the war being fought inside Emma's mind. The voice that had driven her to excellence for decades, the one that sounded suspiciously like her mother's, was screaming at her to regain control. Perfect surgeons don't have shaking hands. Perfect surgeons don't doubt themselves. "You're weak. You're failing. They'll see." But there was another voice, one she'd been trying to ignore for weeks now. It whispered questions that had no place in an operating room. "When did you last feel joy? When did you last feel anything?" The session with Dr. Martinez 2 days later felt like a betrayal of everything Emma had built her identity around. "I don't understand why I'm here," Emma said, sitting rigidly in the therapist's chair. "I requested this appointment for stress management techniques. My performance has been exemplary." Dr. Martinez, a woman in her 50s with gentle eyes and an unsettling ability to see through pretense, nodded slowly. "Tell me about your performance." "Flawless. My surgical outcomes are above department average. My patient satisfaction scores are consistently high. I publish research, mentor residents, serve on committees." Emma's words came out like a medical report, clean, factual, empty. "And how do you feel about this performance?" Emma blinked. The question felt foreign, like being asked to speak a language she'd never learned. "I feel satisfied. Achievement is its own reward." "Is it?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Emma felt something twist in her chest, but she pushed it down with practiced efficiency. "Dr. Chen, when was the last time you made a mistake?" "I don't make mistakes." The response was automatic, defensive. Surgeons can't afford mistakes. "Everyone makes mistakes, Emma. Even surgeons." Emma's jaw tightened. "Not me. Not in surgery, not in life. That's why I'm successful." But even as she said it, something inside whispered, "What about Monday? What about the shaking? What about the voice that says you're dying inside?" Dr. Martinez leaned forward slightly. "Tell me about the voice in your head that says you can't make mistakes." Emma shifted uncomfortably. How could this stranger know about the voice? "I don't know what you mean." "The voice that tells you what you should be doing, feeling, thinking." "We all have one. What does yours sound like?" Emma was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was smaller than usual. "It sounds demanding, disappointed when I'm not perfect. Like nothing is ever quite good enough." "Whose voice does it remind you of?" The answer came before Emma could stop it. "My mother's." The admission felt like a betrayal. Dr. Catherine Chen was a respected physics professor, a woman who had overcome significant obstacles as an immigrant to achieve academic success. Emma had been raised to honor that legacy, to never disappoint, to always exceed expectations. "Tell me about your mother." "She's brilliant, accomplished. She sacrificed everything for her career and our family. She expects excellence because she knows I'm capable of it." Emma's words sounded rehearsed, like a speech she'd given herself 1,000 times. "And what happens when you're not excellent?" Emma's throat tightened. There's disappointment, distance, The feeling that I've failed not just myself but her sacrifices. When did you first learn that love was conditional on performance? The question hit Emma like a scalpel finding an artery. She felt exposed, raw. I was 7. I came home excited about a drawing I'd made in art class. My mother looked at it and said, "It's nice, but wouldn't you rather spend that time practicing violin? Art is for people who can't excel in important things." What did 7-year-old Emma learn from that? That my joy didn't matter. That only achievements that impressed others were worth pursuing. That love came with conditions I had to constantly earn. Dr. Martinez wrote something down. And how has that served you? It's made me successful, respected, valuable. But even as Emma said it, the words felt hollow. And how has it hurt you? Emma opened her mouth to deny that it had hurt her, but found she couldn't. I don't know how to be. I only know how to perform. The conversation continued for 50 minutes, with Emma providing measured, appropriate responses while fighting the growing sense that she was being seen, really seen, for the first time in years. It terrified her. What Dr. Martinez didn't know yet was that Emma's stress management request had come after 3 sleepless nights following the surgery incident. 3 nights of staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment, trying to understand why her body had suddenly refused to cooperate with her mind's demands for perfection. "I'd like to try something different next session," Dr. Martinez said as their time ended. "If you're open to it." Emma's response was controlled, professional. "I'm open to evidence-based therapeutic techniques. I'd like you to consider that there might be parts of yourself you've never allowed to exist. Parts you've buried because they didn't fit the image of who you thought you needed to be." As Emma walked to her car, the mask she'd worn for so long felt heavier than usual. But underneath it, something was stirring. Something that had been sleeping for so long she'd forgotten it existed. The next week brought what would later be known as, quote, the incident. Mrs. Patterson, 73, post-op complications. Emma had been working for 18 hours straight when the crash call came. Another surgeon could have taken it, should have taken it, but Emma never passed off cases. Perfect surgeons didn't need rest. She saved Mrs. Patterson's life. Again. Another flawless procedure, another victory for the department's star surgeon. But in the recovery room, watching the elderly woman breathe steadily, Emma felt something crack inside her chest. Not break. She was too controlled for that. But crack. Like ice under pressure. Mrs. Patterson reminded her of someone. Her grandmother, maybe. Or the grandmother she'd wished she'd had. Someone who might have told 8-year-old Emma that it was okay to get second place in the science fair. Someone who might have hugged her when she cried, instead of suggesting she try harder next time. The thought came from nowhere and hit her like a surgical instrument to the gut. When had she last cried? Mrs. Patterson stirred slightly, and Emma found herself reaching out to smooth the woman's hair. The gesture was automatic, tender, and completely unlike the professional detachment she maintained with all patients. "You remind me of someone," Emma whispered, not expecting the woman to hear. But Mrs. Patterson's eyes fluttered open, focusing slowly on Emma's face. "Do I remind you of someone good, dear?" The question was simple, kind, and it shattered something inside Emma. "Yes," she whispered. "Someone I wish I'd known better." "It's never too late to get to know ourselves better," Mrs. Patterson said softly, before drifting back to sleep. The words followed Emma through post-op rounds, through her afternoon consultations, through the drive home to her pristine downtown apartment where everything was exactly as she'd left it, because nothing was ever out of place in Dr. Emma Chen's life. She stood in her bathroom, looking at herself in the mirror. Perfect makeup, despite the 18-hour day. Perfect posture. Perfect expression of controlled competence. And for one terrifying moment, she didn't recognize herself. Her reflection looked like a stranger wearing her face. Someone playing the role of Dr. Emma Chen. Hitting all the marks, saying all the right lines, but missing something essential, something that might have been real. The crack widened. That night, for the first time in 15 years, Dr. Emma Chen called in sick. She spent the day in bed, not sleeping, just lying there, feeling the unfamiliar sensation of not being perfect. It was like learning to breathe underwater, disorienting and frightening, but somehow necessary. Her phone rang 17 times. Colleagues needing consultations, residents with questions, the department secretary confirming tomorrow's schedule. Each ring felt like an accusation. You're letting people down. You're failing in your responsibilities. But Emma didn't answer. For one day, she let herself be unavailable, imperfect, human. The silence of her apartment felt strange. When was the last time she'd been home during daylight hours? When was the last time she'd noticed that her kitchen window faced east, letting in morning sun that painted golden rectangles on the floor? She found herself standing in those rectangles of light, feeling the warmth on her skin, and realized she couldn't remember the last time she'd simply stood still without purpose or agenda. The feeling was terrifying and oddly peaceful. When she returned to Dr. Martinez's office the following week, something had shifted. "How are you feeling, Emma?" Emma started with her usual response, then stopped. The word "fine" felt like a lie sitting on her tongue. "I don't know how I'm feeling. I can't remember the last time someone asked me that, and I didn't have an immediate answer." Dr. Martinez leaned forward slightly. What would it be like to not know for a while? Terrifying. The honesty surprised Emma. I've built my entire life on knowing. On being certain. On being... She paused, searching for words that had never needed to exist before. On being perfect. And how is that working for you? Emma almost laughed, but it came out as something closer to a sob. I saved a woman's life last week, and all I could think about was how tired I was. How empty I felt. How I couldn't remember why I became a doctor in the first place. This confession felt like stepping off a cliff. Tell me about that little girl who wanted to become a doctor, Dr. Martinez said softly. Emma's throat tightened. The memory came in fragments. Herself at 8, watching a medical drama on TV, turning to her parents and declaring with absolute certainty that she would save lives. The excitement in her voice, the pure joy of having found her calling. She wanted to help people. She wanted to matter. She wanted... The words came slowly, painfully, like extracting shrapnel. She wanted to be loved. And did becoming perfect help her be loved? It helped her be admired, respected, valued. Emma's voice grew quieter. But loved? I don't know if anyone has ever loved the real me, because I don't think I've ever let anyone see her. The silence that followed was different from the usual therapeutic pauses. This one felt full of possibility and terror in equal measure. Emma, I want to try something. Close your eyes. Emma's body tensed. I don't understand the therapeutic benefit of... Trust me for a moment. Against her better judgment, Emma closed her eyes. I want you to imagine yourself at 8 years old. Can you see her? Emma nodded reluctantly. The image came easier than expected. A serious little girl with pigtails and enormous dark eyes. What is she wearing? A yellow dress with flowers. She loved that dress even though it wasn't practical. My mother always said it would get dirty. What is 8-year-old Emma doing? She's playing. Alone. She's made up a story about being a doctor in a magical kingdom where she heals people with kindness instead of just medicine. Emma's voice had grown softer, younger. In her mind's eye, she could see this little girl so clearly. The imagination, the gentleness, the joy that hadn't yet been trained out of her. What would you like to say to her? Emma was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was thick with tears she wasn't aware of shedding. I'd tell her that her kindness is more important than her grades. That it's okay to play. That she doesn't have to earn love by being perfect. The words came in a rush. I'd tell her that the yellow dress is beautiful, and it doesn't matter if it gets dirty. What else? I'd tell her that she's enough. Just as she is, that she doesn't have to fix or save or impress anyone to be worthy of love. Emma opened her eyes, startled to find tears streaming down her face. She reached for tissues, embarrassed by the display of emotion. I'm sorry, she said automatically. I don't know what came over me. When was the last time you apologized for crying? Emma thought. When I was 9. My parents told me that successful people don't cry over setbacks. They learn from them and do better next time. And what did 9-year-old Emma learn from that? That emotions are weaknesses. That people will only value me if I'm strong all the time. That love is conditional on performance. The words tumbled out like a confession. And what does 38-year-old Emma think about that now? Emma looked up, her eyes red and puffy, her perfect facade completely destroyed. I think that little girl has been trying so hard to earn love that she forgot how to feel worthy of it. Dr. Martinez nodded. That sounds like the beginning of wisdom. But what do I do with this wisdom? Emma's voice was small, lost. I don't know how to be anything other than perfect. It's all I know. You don't have to know everything right now. What would it be like to be curious instead of certain? Terrifying, Emma admitted. But also, maybe a little exciting? As Emma left the office that day, the terror was almost overwhelming. If she wasn't the perfect surgeon, the flawless colleague, the woman who never faltered, then who was she? But alongside the terror was something else, a tiny spark of curiosity about the woman she might be if she stopped performing and started living. The question followed her through the following days like a shadow. At work, she found herself second-guessing responses that used to be automatic. When a resident asked her opinion, she paused before answering, wondering if what she was about to say was truly what she believed, or just what perfect Emma was supposed to say. The distinction was harder to determine than she'd expected. She also began noticing things she'd been blind to for years. The way her shoulders tensed whenever Dr. Williams, the department head, walked into a room. The way she held her breath during staff meetings, constantly monitoring her performance. The way she edited every casual comment for maximum professional impact. It was exhausting to suddenly see the elaborate performance she'd been running for decades. 2 weeks later, another crack appeared. Dr. Williams, the department head, made a cutting remark about another surgeon's technique during a meeting. Normally, Emma would have stayed silent or even agreed, anything to maintain her position as the favored one, the one who never rocked the boat. Instead, she heard herself saying, I think Dr. Rodriguez's approach has merit. Maybe we could learn from it instead of dismissing it. The room went quiet. Dr. Williams looked surprised. Emma's heart pounded. She had just defended someone instead of protecting her own image. It felt revolutionary and terrifying. After the meeting, Dr. Rodriguez approached her. Thank you for backing me up in there. I know that wasn't easy. Emma started to deflect, to minimize her contribution, but stopped. It felt like the right thing to do. The words were simple, honest, and completely unlike her usual careful political calculations. She had spoken from some place inside herself that she was only beginning to discover. You know, Dr. Rodriguez continued, I've always admired your skill, but I never felt like I could approach you. You seemed so untouchable. Today felt different. The comment hit Emma unexpectedly. Untouchable. Is that how she appeared to others? Professional competence wrapped in such thick armor that human connection became impossible? I'm not trying to be untouchable, Emma said quietly. Maybe that's the point. You're human, just like the rest of us. It's nice to see. Walking to her car that evening, Emma realized that for the first time in months, she wasn't exhausted. She was scared, uncertain, and completely out of her depth, but not tired in the bone-deep way that had become her normal state. She was changing, and she didn't know where it would lead. That night, she called Drive, Martinez's office, and scheduled twice-weekly sessions instead of weekly. When the receptionist asked if there was a particular reason, Emma paused. "I think I'm ready to meet myself," she said finally, "and I'm going to need help." The weeks that followed were a series of small earthquakes in Emma's carefully constructed world. In therapy, Dr. Martinez introduced her to concepts that felt foreign but intriguing, the idea of different parts of herself that she'd exiled in favor of perfection. "There's the part of you that became a doctor," Dr. Martinez explained during one session. "But there are other parts too. The part that loved that yellow dress. The part that wanted to heal with kindness. The part that's tired of performing. How do I access these parts?" "Start by noticing them. When do you feel most like yourself? When do you feel most like a performer?" Emma began paying attention. She felt most like herself in quiet moments with patients. The tender gesture with Mrs. Patterson, the extra minute spent explaining a procedure to an anxious family member. She felt most like a performer in meetings, during presentations, anytime her professional image was on display. "What would happen," Dr. Martinez asked one day, "if you let more of your authentic self show up at work? People might see that I'm not as competent as they think. Or they might see that you're more human than they realized. Which of those feels more frightening?" Emma considered this. "The humanity. Competence is safe. Humanity is vulnerable. And what's wrong with vulnerability?" "Everything," Emma said immediately, then paused. "At least, that's what I was taught. Vulnerable people get hurt. They get taken advantage of. They get dismissed." "By whom?" "My mother, other students, professors who favored the strongest candidates." Emma's voice grew quieter. "Everyone, really. And who taught you that vulnerability was weakness?" The question unlocked another memory. Emma, 12 years old, crying over a failed friendship. Her mother's response: "Successful people don't waste energy on people who don't appreciate their value. You're better than tears." I learned that emotions made me weak. That caring too much was a liability. That I had to be harder than everyone else to succeed. What if that were wrong? The possibility hung between them like a bridge Emma wasn't sure she was ready to cross. But slowly, incrementally, she began taking tiny steps toward authenticity. She thanked residents more specifically for their contributions. She admitted uncertainty when she didn't know something immediately. She even, in a moment of complete terror, asked a colleague for advice on a challenging case. The world didn't end. In fact, people seemed to respond more warmly to this slightly more human version of Dr. Chen. 3 months into therapy, Emma was far from transformed. She still struggled with the need for external validation. She still caught herself performing perfection instead of living authentically. Some days, the old patterns felt easier than the difficult work of discovering who she really was. But something fundamental had shifted. She had touched something real inside herself, something that existed independent of achievement and approval. It was small and fragile, and often buried under layers of conditioning, but it was undeniably there. The most significant moment came during a surgery that didn't go according to plan. Complications arose that no one could have anticipated. For a terrifying few minutes, Emma thought she might lose the patient. The old Emma would have blamed herself, would have replayed every decision obsessively, would have carried the weight of near failure like a stone in her chest. But this Emma, this slightly more human version, found herself thinking, "I did everything I could with the information I had. Sometimes that's enough." The patient survived. The outcome was good, if not perfect. And for the first time in her career, Emma felt something other than the need to do better next time. She felt grateful for the opportunity to help, regardless of the outcome. She didn't know where this journey would take her. She didn't know if she could build a life around authenticity instead of perfection. She didn't know if people would love the real her, or if she was strong enough to find out. But for the first time in her adult life, she was curious about the answers instead of terrified of them. And that, Dr. Martinez told her, was exactly where real change began. The mask wasn't gone, might never be completely gone, but it was no longer welded to her face. Some days she could lift it just enough to let herself breathe. Some days she even forgot to put it on at all. That would have to be enough for now. As she sat in her apartment one evening, still wearing scrubs from a long surgery, Emma caught sight of herself in the hallway mirror. Her hair was messy, her face was tired, her clothes were wrinkled. She looked human. And for the first time in decades, that felt like enough. What masks have you worn so long that you've forgotten they were masks? Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is admit we don't know who we are underneath our performance of who we think we should be. Names and details changed for privacy, inspired by Jungian therapeutic principles.